Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is the Upper Tier Podcast. It's Tuesday, so we're going to be doing our review of Dark Side of the Ring. And this week, it's the turn of no less Abdullah the Butcher. This was an interesting episode. A lot of kind of layers to this and stuff like that. It was an interesting dynamic. Certainly a tough one for me to do because most people know I'm not a huge fan of hardcore wrestling. There's a time and a place for getting colour and the bleeding and all that kind of stuff. But when it's so regular and enshrined and encapsulated in a gimmick, it doesn't really draw my attention. So let's start with this one anyway. Such an interesting one as well. It's kind of like it felt with this one with Dark Side of the Ring, the boys, that they kind of gotten two episodes in one. Because on one hand, you have kind of Abdullah the Butcher and his life and all the talk and everything he went through. And then on the other hand, you have all the kind of court case with Devon Hannibal and all this kind of stuff. So it's an interesting dynamic from that point of view. There's a couple of things that are put out in the episode that are either believable or not believable, or let me know how you think on those things. But certainly it was quite a dynamic episode. And of course, it starts out, of course, Tony Atlas, Mick Foley are involved in it. Mick Foley, of course, when you're talking about a guy and bleeding and hardcore and all that, I mean, Mick Foley is the guy to be involved in that show, isn't he? Tony Atlas was also involved, and Hugo Savanovic, who was his manager down in Puerto Rico. Interesting dynamic from those three people and stuff like that. But yeah, that was the overall feeling from it was kind of like it was two episodes in one. And it was like as if the stuff with Hannibal and stuff like that, and we'll go through it, kind of hijacked the episode, if you like. I have to say I wasn't a huge fan of Abdullah the Butcher, as I said already. I wasn't really into the huge side of hardcore wrestling. I didn't have a kind of a bloodlust in me from that kind of thing and stuff like that. So I wouldn't have seen a whole lot of Abdullah the Butcher. So from a footage point of view and all, I thought the episode was really, really good. Some of the footage that I showed now was really, really cool. But let's get into it. I mean, it starts off obviously with the warning: the following program contains dangerous acts performed by professionals. Do not try this at home. Absolutely, and it's quite gruesome. Like when you see the footage in there of what these guys go through and stuff like that, and it didn't feel like there was a choice involved. But I did like the way Tony Atlas made the point that himself and Carlos Colon down in Puerto Rico, that Abdullah was a huge part of those guys becoming stars and stuff like that. So he was quite respected in the business from that point of view and stuff like that. But I don't know, when you see guys digging forks into each other's foreheads and stuff like that and all, I kind of just, for me, it switched the channel time. I can't really tolerate it, to be honest. But it starts off with Mick Foley talking about how Abdullah travelled from region to region and stuff like that. He was quite feared. He developed this character as a monster, and we will get back to the start of his life and all that kind of stuff. And that Mick Foley said it wasn't so much about who won or lost a match. It was about surviving a match and coming out the other side kind of alive somewhat. And it shows footage of Abdullah and all, and he's scared the absolute bejesus out of crowds and all, absolutely emptying the building. They're such in fear of this man and stuff like that. And it's the one thing you can say about Abdullah the Butcher, and from that context as well, I suppose, the fact that nearly all the people involved in the episode, they're all alive. So that's one thing starting out anyway. So that's kind of a good starting point for the Dark Side of the Ring. But yeah, the one thing you could say about Abdullah the Butcher is he definitely encapsulated the gimmick. He definitely lived and bred the gimmick. Never came out of character, was always in character. Mick Foley talks about it, he was always there, and to the point where they even talk about, I think the talk is, I seen Jim Cornette doing a review, and he was talking about when they were getting plane tickets, the plane ticket would say on it, "A Butcher," instead of Larry Shreves or whatever it is. It's crazy, you know what I mean, when you think about it back then. But that's the way it was back then. Kayfabe was absolutely monstrous, and of course, if you were portraying this character, this monster, this bloodlust Sudan with a hunter or whatever it is. You know what I mean? I mean, you had to keep that character a certain way, not dissimilar to say Undertaker and various people like that and all. You know, so it was certainly a very interesting episode from that point of view. But it goes back, and let's say it starts with him. It kind of starts with him growing up, you know, in his family. There was 8 in his family. Daz is in. What's the crack, Daz? How are you, pal? Good to see you in there, mate. But it goes back and it starts with his family. There was 8 in the family, and it goes back and it shows the family home. Now, the family home to me just looked like a decent garden shed, the size of it, and there was 8 of them in this house. Like, this house was tiny, and you get an introduction to the sister, Josephine. And she talks about how well you get Hugo first, and Hugo talks about him being a proper savage and all this kind of thing. And but you could tell by Hugo the way he spoke fondly of him as well and stuff like that. And he had a huge following and all. I mean, he was massive in Japan. They talk about his time in Japan and the money that he earned, the contracts that he signed, and the merchandise and the ads and everything he was involved in. He was absolutely massive in Japan, earned an awful lot of money and stuff like that. And we'll come back to that, of course. But it goes in and talks about his sister, and she mentions that he could tear phone books in half and all this kind of stuff. So he was legit, basically. And then it talks about his brother, goes into his brother, what was his brother's name? Ralph Shreve. Talks about his brother, and he was talking about how he was the only kid that had a room to himself. And he says, the interviewer turns around and goes, and why was that? And he says, because I slept in the bath. You know, and this was this weird dynamic and stuff like that. His room was the bathroom, and he slept in the bath. You know, so that'll tell you trying to make ends meet. And then it goes off, and it talks about, you know, what his parents had to do, and his mother and all. She used to scrub floors in funeral homes and all, and he got very emotional about that. How it upset him to see his mother on her hands and knees, basically scrubbing floors for people and stuff like that. And then when he went off and became so successful, uh, he came back then with the riches of his fame, if you like, and he sent money back to his mother-in-law, and he told her to leave the funeral home, that she'd never work a day in her life again. And I think he more or less achieved that, he said, and stuff like that, you know. So that was kind of a pretty cool moment in the episode, and you could see how emotional it was for him. He kind of broke down talking about it. And of course, you can imagine this day and age, if you were there watching your mother on her hands and knees scrubbing floors for people and stuff like that, you know, to earn basically the bare minimum, basically, to get by. You can imagine trying to get by in a house, 8 people and stuff like that. Daz is back in. I'm okay, Niall. Was this guy in WWE early days when he used to be WWF? No, I don't think he was. Never in there, Daz. Never in WWF. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame, I think, in 2011, if I'm right. I'll check that out. It's later on in the episode when we look at it. But he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, but he never worked in WWE or WWF. I don't think Vince would have ever taken the risk on it. And that's kind of what comes through there, you know, how much he cared for his family and made sure that his family were all right. And, you know, his sister talks about, like, even in tough times when he was a kid and stuff like that, he always tried to turn tricks and stuff like that. They talk about him buying sweets, X amount of sweets for a penny and stuff like that, and he'd be selling them in the schoolyard and at the school and all that kind of stuff, just trying to turn over more money. You know, to provide basically for the family. And his sister makes the point that he was always trying to generate some money so the family had what it needed and stuff like that. So it's a great picture that was painted of the man, you know. And then he talks about how he was involved in karate and stuff like that, and he used to run karate classes for elderly people and all that kind of stuff to make a few quid. And one of the promoters came along and seen him one day and said that he should wrestle, and he thought that this was all nonsense, but he got involved in wrestling, and the Sheik, the original Sheik, was his kind of his mentor and stuff like that when he went in. And obviously we know how crazy the Sheik was in his matches back in the day and stuff like that. I'm looking forward to watching it. Callous, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it was interesting to see what the dynamic and all was like there, you know. So it paints this picture of a fairly tough upbringing and stuff like that, and trying to provide for, you know, 7-8 people between his mum scrubbing floors and stuff like that was really, really tough. Then we start talking about the episode, and he talks about, you know, being influenced by the Sheik and stuff like that, and this is where it gets a little bit gruesome and stuff like that and all. This is the character is starting to come through and stuff like that, and you're getting color nearly every single night, and it's quite gruesome. And you have the blading and the forking and all that kind of stuff, and you can see from a lot of these old school guys and stuff like that. If you remember, like Dusty Rhodes's forehead, and you see Larry's forehead, the butcher's forehead in it as well, and so many of them and stuff like that over the years and stuff like that. Like if you think about Ric Flair back then when I was watching wrestling in the 80s, Ric Flair would enter the ring with a lovely blonde set of hair, and he'd leave, and the hair would be like pure claret, it'd be nearly like a redhead and stuff like that from getting colour and stuff like that. Especially for a lot of those cage matches or Texas bull rope matches or any of those kind of things. But yeah, very, very interesting dynamic with Abdullah the Butcher and stuff like that. And then he became he became synonymous with the territories and stuff like that. That sort of hardcore style and stuff that came out, and there was a want for it then and stuff like that all the time and stuff. So he was a huge draw and stuff like that, and he made a lot of money, signed a lot of big contracts, and that kind of comes back to the dynamic as well. Later on, they talk about his ability to read and write and stuff like that, and kind of that comes out. We'll touch on it later and stuff like that as we get through the episode. But it's a tough one. We know, Abdullah turned around and he says he's involved in all sorts of legal trouble and stuff like that, and that he's in bad shape. He comes in, you see him coming in, he's in the chair and the walking frame and stuff like that, so you can see he's not too good. A lot of the theory going around when we talk about the Hannibal situation, we know that he brought him up for a retirement match, and like this whole blood kind of thing really bothers me and worries me at times in terms with airborne sort of diseases and all that kind of stuff and all. But he brought him up, and apparently, I don't know what he was expecting, but apparently it's most unusual if your opponent opens you up. But apparently he says in the match it was Abdullah who opened him up, and he was diagnosed with hepatitis C. And he reckons he went through a sort of a court case and stuff like that. There was a civil action taken where Abdullah was found liable, I think it is, but not guilty, similar to the O.J. Simpson trial, if you like, in relation to the Hep C case with Hannibal. Hannibal claiming that he had a huge future ahead of himself in WWE and developmental and all that kind of stuff. And that was killed off as soon as he was diagnosed with hepatitis C. Obviously, the company had to let him go. Now, it's hard to know what way that works as well, because Hannibal's character as well is the blood hunter, and he was going around doing similar stuff. So it's really, really hard to know. A lot of these other guys that Abdullah worked with never tested positive for hepatitis C. Now, it doesn't go into any detail in relation to whether they were tested or not and how the test went and all that kind of stuff. But from what Hugo said, he basically makes the point that none of the other guys who worked with him ever tested positive for hepatitis C. So the thing would be is, if that's the case, it's kind of a little bit up in the air. I'm not sure what way to take it. Like, some could say that maybe Hannibal gave him hepatitis C. Who knows? You know what I mean? It's very hard to know what way it went. But the court ruled in favour of Hannibal. And it's not taken well in the wrestling community and stuff like that. We know the background story, obviously, with Bob Orton as well and The Undertaker and stuff like that and all. And it's a very, very serious issue, this hepatitis C and stuff like that. And that's probably part of the reason I don't like to see people bleeding all over rings and all that kind of stuff and all over each other and all that. It's so dangerous when you're doing that kind of thing with blood. And we know for years WWE has gone through a system where they're very careful in terms of all that type of stuff. I remember actually being at a house show in the Tree Arena in Dublin, and it was a tag match, I think, and it was Legacy versus Christian and someone else. Can't remember who the other wrestler was with Christian. But this going back to the Legacy days, so this would have been when Ted and Cody Rhodes were tagging. Orton would have been the kind of leader of Legacy, if you remember. And I remember Christian got busted open. I think he did a dive into the corner sometime, and he hit his head off the post or something like that. And he got busted open. And it had gotten so extreme at that stage that what they did was they actually stopped the match. They brought in EMTs. They cleaned all the blood off him. They put a load of gel on his head, or that glue or Vaseline or whatever it is. And then they restarted the match, which is kind of weird when you're sitting there in an audience. So it just kills off From a safety point of view, spot on, but it just kills off the whole momentum of the match and how the match was going, and the crowd was into it. So the crowd then was obviously, when the match really starts, the crowd is quite flat, and it's like you're nearly restarting the match again. So you have to build the crowd up again. But that's how extreme it was, in terms of their dealing with blood and stuff like that. But yeah, then it goes through. They talk about this court case and how it went and all, and Devin Hannibal. He basically says that he basically wants to see. What did he say? He hopes he dies a slow death or something like that. So you can tell how he feels about it. Apparently, there was a liability thing in the case, but no money has changed hands, because you get the picture then from his caregiver. Who was his caregiver? Where is she? There it is. There, his caregiver was Jocelyn Marshall. She was his caregiver. So what they met each other while handing food out to the hungry and stuff like that. And Abdullah had a restaurant, and he used to supply her with some of the food and stuff like that to give out. And she had no idea who Abdullah the butcher was. And then they seen a picture. There was a picture, obviously, in the restaurant takeaway kind of thing that he had, where he did ribs and all sorts of stuff. And it was her son who actually told her who he was, that he was Abdullah the butcher. Let's take a few questions. Yeah, that's Cody's documentary looks good. I heard. Yeah, apparently they're using AEW footage and all. I was talking about it on the show on Sunday night, so she'll be interested. Yeah, absolutely fantastic, friend. Please stay connected with me. Yeah, absolutely, and thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Daz, what's your favorite SummerSlam of all time, Niall? Oh, yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't think I have a favorite one. I did attend Daz. I went to a SummerSlam. I think it was 08. I think it was 08. It was 08 in New Jersey in the Rutherford Arena, either 08 or 07. I think it was 08. I'm not too sure. 08 or 07 anyway. And it was one of the worst SummerSlams I've ever been to. It was the one where Ray was the Silver Surfer. I think he wrestled Chavo. And it was the one where Triple H wrestled Booker T. And Booker T was heading off to TNA. And basically, Triple H bet the shite out of him, legit nearly. Didn't sell for him for anything and sent him packing basically out the door to TNA. It was kind of a horrible SummerSlam. But one of the most enjoyable ones I liked, I think, was it 05, which was the one with Hogan and Michaels. The one with Hogan and Michaels I thought was absolutely gas, and the build up to it I thought was cool, where Michaels was doing the Larry King skits and all that kind of stuff, and then the match of course was just crazy. Where he was selling like crazy, Michaels, for Hogan and all. He was overselling everything and dramming it all up and stuff like that. I just thought it was hilarious. But the build up to that I thought was really cool. Hogan versus Michaels and stuff like that was really funny and stuff like that. But yeah, there's been some cracking SummerSlams out there, hasn't there? Evening Henry popped in to give a like before I do my live. Yeah, and good luck. Enjoy your show, pal. Thanks for dropping in. Daz, Evening Henry series, are you up to on Only Fools and Horses? He's absolutely flying on them at the moment, Daz. 92, mine Wembley. Yeah, 92 was cool, Daz. Great stories coming out of 92, obviously Bulldog and Brett and stuff like that. But my favourite story out of 92, of course, is the Road Warriors when Animal burnt his leg on the exhaust pipe. I don't know if you're familiar with that story and stuff like that. But that was really, really cool. They parked the bikes too close, and they look really cool coming down on the bikes now. But they parked the bikes too close, and I think Animal had to get off the wrong side. And when he got off, he put his leg against the exhaust pipe, and he burnt the leg off himself. It's a great story from the Road Warriors. Yeah, I think it is. I think you're right. 08, I think it is. Yeah, I think it's 08. Yeah, but it was in the Rutherford Arena in New Jersey. I was actually, when I was over for WrestleMania 35, is in the MetLife. And right beside the MetLife, if you look way across the car park, that's where the old Rutherford Arena is. So it's mad the way they do that. Yeah, they had the puppet. Yeah, they had the puppet on the bike and stuff like that and all. Yeah, Paul Ellering and all. So cool. I was a huge fan of the Road Warriors. When their music hits, it's just sensational. I was actually looking at some videos last week, because I think either last week or the week before we did a short on it, and it was their debut in WWF. I remember when they came out and the crowd just erupted. I was such a fan of the Road Warriors and the Legion of Doom. Unbelievable. I actually have a set of the pads somewhere in the shop, actually. I went to a show back in 05, Daz, and I actually dressed up as I dressed up as Animal. Hang on a second to get a fit. There we go. I was at a show, Daz, in 2005. I don't know whether you'll be able to see this or not. I was there with my daughter. It was an outdoor show in 2005 called the Summer Bash. It was actually Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero in a street fight, but it was outside in the RDS where Leinster sometimes played their rugby. And it was an outdoor show, and Austin was there as well. I think he was a guest referee in a match. John Cena was wrestling someone. And that was the one where John Cena wasn't drinking at the time. He was a teetotaler, and Austin kept on throwing the cans of beer at him, and he kept on cracking the cans and just pouring them down his chest, pretending to drink them. It was so funny. But I remember Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero street fight was sensational. And I think actually there was a match on it. It was JBL versus Finley, and they knocked the bejesus out of each other. Hornswoggle was involved in it, the shillelagh, the whole lot was absolutely amazing. But it was a great show. It was an outdoor show, and it was the first outdoor show I'd gone to. So it was pretty cool. But this is yours truly dressed up as Animal out of the Road Warriors. I don't know if you can see that. I had the hair done, the whole lot, got the makeup done, the whole lot was brilliant, had the pads on, everything. And we were walking up to that show, that's good story. We were walking up to that show, and was The Rock there, Niall, or Jericho? No, I don't think so. I think Jericho at the time was on the sabbatical. He was doing the first start of the stuff with Fozzy. Because I remember, I think in '05 we had Jericho doing a signing in the shop, and it was his first tour in Europe with Fozzy, as far as I know. They were only playing small venues. So I don't think Jericho was on it. I'm nearly sure he wasn't. Maybe I stand corrected now. But we were walking up around to the RDS, and you go by the RDS all around that Ballsbridge area. It's big into rugby. It's a big rugby area. Lansdowne, the Aviva, all that kind of stuff. And there was loads of rugby lads outside. There was a rugby match on live on the telly, and they were all supping pints of Guinness to use and stuff. And we came around the corner dressed up to the Legion of Doom, and we had to walk by all these lads, and they just started screaming, "Oh, what a rush!" and all. And it was so cool. A lot of rugby lads, they knew their shit, even though they were slagging the pro wrestling off and stuff like that. They knew their shit, so it was a good laugh. Yeah, had a great time at it and stuff. My daughter loved it and all that kind of stuff. Really cool. I think if I'm right, that was the day of the autograph session, and I got to meet Kurt Angle and Trish Stratus. They're the two that were doing the autograph session in HMV on Grafton Street, I think, for that show as well. So yeah, we get back into the episode anyway. We got a little bit derailed there, but that's always a good thing. We love that kind of stuff, those little segues and stuff like that. So Tony Atlas is talking then. They're actually his carer is talking, his caregiver or whatever. She's talking about how bad a shape he's in and stuff like that. And like she shows little snippets around the house and all, how the house is kind of falling apart a little bit and needs work done and all this kind of thing. And they're basically giving the impression that he's broke as a joke. That's what they're trying to put across in the episode, because there is a lot of talk out there that maybe he had money and he had wealth and he's been hiding this away because of the court case and stuff like that. Whether that's the case or not, I don't know, but that's kind of the angle that they're coming from. So Devin, also your man Hannibal, he also talks about the build up to that match and stuff like that. They're doing press in Canada, and they're talking about they're on TV and stuff like that. And one of the presenters on the show brings out a fork, and of course Abdullah attacks him with the fork and just loses it. And the presenter on the show ends up getting cut and stuff like that, and he gets cut up and stuff like that. And Devin makes the point, he says he doesn't know how he got away with it. It was just crazy at this time. Like these days, it'd be absolute assault, you know what I mean? Daz back in again. I will send you the AEW cards and SmackDown one when they're out. Look, brilliant, Daz. Really appreciate that stuff you're sending me. It's absolutely great. Keeps me fully abreast of things, as they say. And then it sort of, this is where it kind of segues then, because they've set the scene there about his childhood, about him growing up, about the contracts. They talk about Devin and the court case and suing him and all that thing. He talks about how he was getting these legal letters and how he couldn't read them. He doesn't know how to kind of read and write and stuff like that. Now, that to me is kind of a little bit of a stretch there, because if you listen to him, stuff like that, they talk earlier in the show about how he knew what his value was and he never was done out of a penny. And the contracts that he signed were quite watertight and stuff like that and all. So whether he can't read or write, I'm not too sure whether that's believable based on some of the size of these contracts he would have signed over in New Japan and wherever else, you know. He was huge down in Puerto Rico as well, which is not a surprise considering the territory. The bloodlust in that territory is absolutely huge. And you can see with the fans, even at the Backlash this year, the fans are just electric. They just are all in on it and stuff like that. And they make it their show. They make it their show. They take over the show. So whoever they want to win, whoever they want to be the good guy or the bad guy or the good girl or the bad girl, they decide that. The booking office really doesn't decide it. So that's how strong they are as a fan base. But yeah, he talks about then, you know, it segues into kind of Hannibal then and kind of his background and stuff like that. So they laid out the court case, the civil case, I should say. And then they talk about Hannibal's issues as well. And they talk about how he was working on a show, I think it was down in Texas or something like that. And, you know, he went in on a referee and stuff like that. And he absolutely gouged up this referee, cut an artery, the whole lot and all. This guy nearly bled out. Apparently he lost over a litre of blood and all. And it shows the ref with his head shaved and there's just gashes out of his head and all this kind of stuff. And it's just weird. It's like someone just lost the plot on him and was absolutely gouging him out and stuff like that. And this led to some legal issues with Hannibal as well and with the referee and the promoter and all that kind of stuff and all, you know. So it's hard to know when you listen to these things and you see to the background and you look at what went on and all these various different things and all. It's a kind of a weird one, you know, when you're trying to put it together. But then it talks about it goes back to Hugo, and Hugo says he didn't test positive for Hep C, and neither did Carlos Colon or anyone else other than Devon as far as he knows. So that begs the question about the hepatitis C. Where did it start? Where did it finish? Who gave it to who? Why didn't other people get it? Most people were working with Abdullah the Butcher. They bled all over each other. If you look at the footage, it's absolute crazy. So no one else. Now, let's see whether they were tested or what happened, or you know what I mean. It doesn't go into a huge amount of detail. It's just a statement that goes out there. And it's probably a counter argument to Hannibal's argument in terms of his court case. He says since the lawsuit was a civil trial, Abdullah was only found liable but not guilty, so nothing has been paid basically. And Hannibal then gets interviewed and he says, I just want to get paid. I just want my money, that kind of thing and all. You know what I mean? And then it's, you know, the way that kind of comes across, you're kind of thinking, was this like an opportunity situation or whatever it was, you know? Then we get a kind of, it kind of comes full circle. Then it says in 2011, of course, Abdullah was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, which for me is always a kind of a strange one. It's always weird for me when wrestlers get inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame that never ever worked in the WWE or were involved in the WWE, but obviously they've left their mark on wrestling. And obviously, they're a big part of some of the wrestlers that are in there. Like Abdullah the Butcher would be a big part of, say, Mick Foley's career and stuff like that. So maybe that's why they went. Then it kind of gets a little bit sad and it moves into sort of Abdullah is asked about his legacy and he just wants the respect for what he has done. And he also did not do the things people accuse him of doing. What people think he will leave up to them. So yeah, it's kind of it was a kind of a tough one to watch. All the characters are still in play, which is always an interesting one. The deviation into the Hannibal stuff was kind of not weird, but it was covered in a kind of a lot of detail, and it was a big part of the episode because it kind of looked like it segued off it, which was an interesting dynamic. But probably for Dark Side of the Ring, you did yourself there by maybe doing 2 episodes in one, maybe, because you could have had a totally separate episode about that. But certainly a very interesting character with an interesting background. Like I said, a gimmick and a style that's not necessarily for me. But I know there's huge amounts of fans out there, of course, based on his success and stuff like that. And we know there's a huge body of hardcore fans out there that like that thing. We see it with the game changer stuff and all the stuff that AEW for a while went down that road as well, quite extreme. But again, it wasn't for me, and I don't know where it fits in someone's career and stuff like that. And especially if you've kind of had quite a spectacular career with a lot of titles, a lot of title runs, and a lot of history and stuff like that. and then you go down into that area. So that's why I found with Chris Jericho and stuff like that, when he started doing a lot of that hardcore stuff and things in AEW and stuff, I kind of looked at that and I said, that's kind of weird. You don't need to be going to that place. You know, your history and your legacy and your everything is enshrined and encapsulated in there. Your career is there in front of you. You don't need to do that, you know what I mean? But for some people, they loved it, but just didn't sit with me. So yeah, it's an interesting one where it kind of goes in waves. Obviously, as I said, the court case one where it segues into the Hannibal stuff probably belongs in an episode all on its own. And this one, you could have just sort of skimmed over it a little bit, but it probably belongs in an episode on its own. That's the only thing that came out of it. But certainly, I mean, he followed through as much as he could in terms of his career. He absolutely monopolized it. He had an absolute cult following. There's no doubt about it. He was huge in Japan, made a lot of money, kept his promise to his mum. She never worked a day in her life after he had made it, which is a lovely story to hear. That her sacrifice for him returned his sacrifice for her, which is really, really cool. I always like that in those stories and stuff like that. Yeah, it's an interesting one. One of the comments that was made, Ric Flair has to have the robe, and Abdullah had the blade or the fork, you know, which is quite an interesting quote. And then Ralph, of course, noted as well. He said he was called the butcher. So what were you expecting? So yeah, some interesting commentary on it and stuff like that. It's another interesting episode as we make our way through season 4. But yeah, serious kickback out of this into the wrestling community as well and stuff like that. You hear Brian and Jim Cornette on their review of it and stuff like that, heavily going in on Devin big time, Devin Hannibal, you know. I don't know a huge amount about him. I know Ian has spoke to him a few times and stuff like that and all. Comes across maybe a little bit strange and stuff like that. But certainly an interesting one to have watched and to have reviewed. Let us know your thoughts, folks. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Let us know how you feel about hardcore wrestling. Let us know how you feel about Abdullah the Butcher, the footage that you're seeing. Must have been absolutely crazy to be at one of those shows. And let us know your thoughts on the Hannibal, the civil case between himself and Hannibal. And, you know, is it credible to think that he couldn't read and write with all these contracts? And some of the guys saying, well, you know, we used to go to restaurants and he'd no problem reading menus and, you know, all this kind of stuff. So is that kind of credible as well? Let us know. There's a lot of questions come out of this episode. So let us know your thoughts on them after watching it. What's the crack, Eno? Thanks for joining us. We're just finishing up, pal, so you'll have to catch it probably on the replay. But yeah, certainly it was a very, very interesting episode. But like I said, the dynamic is that all the players were in play. So you weren't talking about someone who had passed away and stuff like that. I have to say, looking at Abdullah, he does look in pretty bad shape. He looks like he's gone through a tough time. That seemed fairly legit. But I just don't know. I don't know if I can believe the not being able to read and write. I'm not too sure if you sign big contracts like that, and especially when they laid out the groundwork to say that he wouldn't be done out of $1, that his contracts were watertight and all that kind of stuff. Someone had to be reading them if it wasn't him. So let's see how that goes. But yeah, another tough one, folks. Do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification, and drop a like on the video. We will be back on Thursday at 8 o'clock as far as I know. Darren just shared it there. We'll be doing a SummerSlam preview. Most of that card is filled out at this stage. I think there's 5 matches at this stage confirmed. Not much more room for any more. But let us know your thoughts on SummerSlam. Join us on Thursday. Let us know your thoughts on how the card is shaping up from the Motor City, Detroit. Eno believes Karma is getting Abdullah. Yeah, I don't know. Ask the referee. See where Karma gets you. Very interesting story. But until next time, folks, absolute pleasure. Make sure, of course, you subscribe on the way out, hit a like, of course, and share the content as well. Really close to this 1K subs now at this stage. I think we're about 35 or 40 off it now at this stage, so we're edging closer and closer all the time. Hope you're enjoying the content. Oh, also Friday, I think Friday evening, I'm on Henry's channel. We're going to be doing a catch-up on Liverpool's pre-season so far, so make sure you keep an eye out for that. I'm sure Henry will be putting it up on the channel. And we'll talk to you again real soon. Cheers, folks. Thanks.